Hello, welcome to this lecture, the Nuremberg trials and the resulting Nuremberg Code in 1947. So this is exactly 10 years after the elixir sulfonilamide incident, just to give you a bit of context. So the Allies won the Second World War, and they had Nuremberg hearings to charge the guilty Nazis. And what is of importance to us is the doctors' trial, as it was called. And 23 doctors were charged and 7 were given death sentences. So what are the charges? Human experimentation and mass murder. That's the picture of Dr. Karl Brandt. That's Adolf Hitler's personal physician who actually instructed him to come up with the gas chambers and, designing of this human experimentation. What was he thinking? He's a clinician. He's a doctor. He's supposed to help and save people, and I cannot imagine what he was thinking. So as you can see, he's wearing headphones. Obviously he cannot speak English, so he was wearing headphones. And Nuremberg Code, so these were 10 commandments. It's almost as if these commandments were given by God himself, who saw these terrible atrocities and he thought, no more, my dear children. So he gave this Nuremberg Code, 10 commandments. So what is the first? The most important one is voluntary, well-informed consent is given by a subject of full legal capacity. So voluntary, that means the subject really agrees to it, and well-informed, that the subject understands all the procedures in the experimentation, the risks and the benefits involved, and he or she willingly agrees to the human experimentation. And the subject has to be of full legal capacity. That means the subject cannot be mentally handicapped or children or an unconscious subject. The subject has to willingly or voluntarily agree to the trial, so the experiment. So the full subject has to be of full legal capacity. So the second one is positive results should be procured for society, which cannot be obtained by any other means. So it has to it has to always have a benefit for society. Potential knowledge is already available, then you don't need to do the experiment. So, and of course, if you can procure the information in another way, like say observational studies, then you can get the information that way. You don't need to do the experiment. But if the experiment gives positive results for society which cannot be obtained by any of those other means, then you're good to go ahead with the experiment. The experiment should be based on proper scientific knowledge which was obtained previously, like animal experiments or the proper scientific rationale. So the experiment has to be justified, that we have seen this data and we need to do this experiment to go to the next step. So that sort of thing. But the Nazi experiments, it was not scientific at all. They didn't see what previous knowledge was there. They just did whatever they wanted. So anyway, this is the rule that Nuremberg Code gave us. The next one, it's really close to my heart. It's like, avoid all unnecessary physical and mental suffering. And Lord Buddha told this many thousands of years ago. Obviously nobody listened to him. I teach only one thing: suffering, an end of all suffering for all living things. Let's take it to heart. At least after this Nuremberg incident, let's work towards this, and I hope people abide by this rule. It's really important as human beings. And this next one, this picture says it all. If there is any risk of death or serious disability, you must put an end to the experiment as soon as possible. So if the experiment requires you to hold a high voltage electric current, no. That should be a warning sign. You should put an end to the experiment. And this is very important. You need to always do a risk-benefit analysis. Benefit should always outweigh any potential or possible risk. Benefit for the subject and benefit for society should always outweigh. So all the doctors and all the people who conduct the trial and who approve the trial, they have, I used the wrong word, the experiment, because at that time they used the word experiment, should make sure that the benefits outweigh the risks. So in the Nazi experiments, was this the case? Not at all. They didn't care. They didn't care about the risks of the subjects. They were prisoners. They wanted the subjects to die. So they could do any experiments they wanted. Anytime they thought of it, they just did the experiments. Because the whole point was they wanted the subjects or the prisoners dead. After the Nuremberg Code was gifted to us or given to us, this is very important. Benefit should always outweigh possible risk. Okay, the next one is preparations and facilities should be there to protect the subjects in case of any risk. For example, in this case, I have shown an oxygen mask. So just imagine the experiment has some risk of asphyxiation. In that case, there should definitely be an oxygen mask. These are just an example, but what I mean is you should have the drugs and the equipment, so forth, necessary help the subject in case of any risk event. And the next one is very important. Experimentation should be conducted by scientifically qualified personnel. Was this the case in the Nazi experiment? No. Maybe the doctors were medically and clinically trained, although their ethics were a little bit messed up, if you might ask me. But most of the experiments were done by Nazi soldiers who were not scientifically trained at all. So anyway, after the Nuremberg Code was given, we must strictly abide by this. Experimentation or the clinical research should be done by scientifically and medically qualified personnel. And this is very close to my heart. Patient or the subject should be able to break away or discontinue from the experimentation or the trial in case he or she is physically or mentally incapable of continuing. This is very important. So patient should be able to break away from the shackle of the experimentation if he or she decides. Was this the case in Nazi experiments? No. First of all, they were prisoners, held against their will and experimented against their will. We have to learn the lesson. Patient or the subject has the right to drop out from the experiment whenever he or she decides to do so. And this is a very funny picture. I don't know whether it's a camel or a giraffe. I think it's a camel. So if there's any risk of death or disability risk involved in continuing the trial, like in this case, if the camel is just about to eat your head, you should put an end to the experiment. That's it, right? It's obvious. Anyway, this brings to the end of the Nuremberg Code. So the 10 Nuremberg commandments, 10, exactly 10. You have 10 fingers and the Nuremberg Code is also 10. Easy to remember. So this is the basis of group clinical practice. Obviously, over the years, after many different historical events, it was optimized or improved, and there was a step up little by little, right? And in 1996 we finally got GCP. But for now, you understand Nuremberg Code, the history behind it. Read about the history, understand it. There were people involved, there was blood involved, there was sweat involved, there was like tears involved in this whole process. So that's what I wanted to impart to you from this lecture, and hope to see you in the next lecture. Ciao.